people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
De la noche, Stephanie Piñeiro.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this, and the story seems to be the EBU officially announced that Laura Grzyb, the unbeaten up-and-comer from Poland, we've talked about several times here on the channel, Laura Grzyb will be taking on Italy's own Maria Cecchi for the vacant EBU title in the Super Bantamweight division at a date and location to be determined.
We got unofficial confirmation of this announcement from Laura Grzyb's own social media.
It appears that young Laura, who has been campaigning just above the Super Bantamweight division at approximately 123 pounds, 123, that is featherweight, within the featherweight limit. She's moving down in weight to 122 pounds, where I think she stands a better chance of winning an alphabet title, it being that the undisputed title fight.
The undisputed featherweight champion will be crowned this weekend when Amanda Serrano takes on Erica Cruz, the last remaining champions in the featherweight division. I think Amanda's going to win that fight, and if she does, Laura's miles away from being ready for an Amanda Serrano. One of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. One of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Laura's not ready for that.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that Laura's not ready to fight for a title. She's just not ready to fight someone like Amanda for a title. Sporting a professional record of 8 wins, no losses, and no draws, 3 knockouts, she's going to be sharing the ring with a familiar face, Maria Cecchi.
Nicknamed the Russian Hurricane.
That's the same Maria Cecchi that shared the ring with Spain's own EBU champion, Mary Romero.
It's the same Maria Cecchi that got outclassed by Mary Romero.
Maria Cecchi that sports a professional record of 8 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts.
She's in a very similar place in her career to Laura Grzyb, but as I always say, not all prospects are created equal, and there's more to boxing than what you see on paper. They may be in a similar place in their careers, and they may have a similar number of fights.
But the contest itself will separate them, and I happen to think that Poland's own unbeaten up-and-comer, Laura Grzyb, she's a more put-together fighter, a more coordinated fighter than Maria Cecchi. Maria Cecchi, who has since rebounded off that loss to Mary Romero in May of last year. She was in action again in December.
Opposite the ring, Bethy Franco, who she won a points decision against in what was a 6-rounder.
She's back in the winner's bracket with no cobwebs or ring rust to have to shake off. She has seen action at least 2 times in the last 12 months. The same applies to Laura Grzyb. Laura Grzyb, who sat out all of 2021 but saw action 3 times in 2022, kicking off the year with a points decision win over Vanessa Caballero, another points decision win over then unbeaten Martine Bisson.
That was in June.
Yet another points decision win over another unbeaten fighter in Marianne Herreria.
And that was in October.
Laura Grzyb, who has some similarities to the United Kingdom's own Ellie Scotney.
Catford.
Some similarities to young Ellie Scotney, Polish version of her in some ways.
27 years old.
Maria Cecchi, who's the same age as Laura.
So what are we looking at here? How's this going to play out?
Well, this fight may have a somewhat different aesthetic to the Maria Cecchi versus Mary Romero fight. Mary Romero, she's a pressure fighter, whereas Laura Grzyb, she's more of a boxer-puncher.
Kind of a hybrid between a pure boxer and a boxer-puncher. She can do a bit of both.
Laura Grzyb, the orthodox fighter to Maria Cecchi, who just so happens to be a southpaw.
For my money, Laura Grzyb is a more put-together fighter, a more coordinated fighter, more fine-tuned fighter, refined, more so than Maria Cecchi.
It really is the little things, the subtleties.
She can fight coming forwards just as well as she can fight going backwards.
A good set of legs under her. She can pick off an advancing opponent, or the opportunity presents itself, lay into
her opponent.
She's malleable. She can box off the back foot, move lateral, fight on the fly if the situation calls for it.
She's malleable like that.
Whereas Maria Cecchi's more crude, Bit rough around the edges.
Not as coordinated as Lara. Not as defensible.
Very scrappy, very messy mid-range to inside when she can get within striking distance of her opponent.
Of course, compare the quality of their movements.
Their range of motion, where Lara is a lot more controlled and a lot more put together, a lot more calculated. Maria Cecchi,
you can see the difference. You can see that Maria Cecchi, she's not as subtle, not as coordinated, that she still needs work. I believe that Maria Cecchi, unless I'm mistaken, is a late starter in the sport, whereas Laura Grzyb, she comes from a respectable amateur background.
She's more settled into her base style than Maria Cecchi. She knows who she is as a fighter, her identity, so to speak.
This fight's going to have a different aesthetic to the Cecchi versus Romero fight on the premise that this isn't a pressure fighter Maria Cecchi's going to be fighting. Laura Grzyb is a cross between a boxer-puncher and a pure boxer.
A big part of the reason that Maria Cecchi had such a rough night at the office opposite the ring, Spain's own Mary Romero, is because Mary's a pressure fighter, an aggressive one. She comes forward throwing punches in bunches, and Maria Cecchi, she's just not an experienced enough operator to manage the distance and keep control of the situation, keep Mary out.
Pressure from Mary Romero flustered Maria Cecchi, and all she could really do was resort to dirty boxing, deliberate clashes of heads, and excessive clinching.
It's what Maria Cecchi resorted to, trying her best to weather the storm, compensating for a lack of mid-range to inside game with plain old dirty boxing.
In this fight with Lara, it is going to be different, look different than that fight did, because Lara's not a pressure fighter.
She's actually more finesse than ferocity. She's not just going to barrel forward throwing punches in bunches and crowd Maria Cecchi the same way that Mary Romero did, though because she's a more put-together and coordinated boxer than Maria Cecchi, Laura Grzyb on point.
That's the way to go. That's the logical choice.
Work is a lot neater, a lot tidier than what you get from Maria Cecchi. Laura Grzyb is a more put-together fighter than Maria.
Not the biggest puncher, though, so there's a good chance the fight goes the distance.
Laura Grzyb on points. That's the pick. And bantamweight news on the heels of the undisputed champion Naoya Inoue vacating all the titles that he just won. Jason Maloney, top rank, to no longer pursue the WBC title. Nonito Donaire awaits next named opponent.
I'm not surprised Jason Maloney's going in another direction.
BoxingScene.com has confirmed Jason Maloney, through promoter Top Rank, has broken away from talks to face Donaire for the vacant WBC bantamweight title. The development comes well ahead of the February 17th deadline assigned to a matchup that was more than months in the making. The WBC has received confirmation from Top Rank that Maloney will not be fighting for the WBC bantamweight title. WBC President Mauricio Suleiman confirmed to the teams for both boxers via an official letter, a copy of which was obtained by BoxingScene.com. With this letter, the process of Maloney versus Donaire is hereby canceled.
Two reasons I can think of. Two reasons primarily, maybe three, why Jason Maloney is choosing to go in another direction.
Maloney was represented in talks by Top Rank while guided by career-long manager Tony Toggi. Donaire is promoted by Probellum and Company co-founder Richard Schaefer, who has now seen several proposed fights between the two companies fail to materialize. Concerns arose over whether or not the two sides could actually reach an accord. Top Rank founder and Hall of Fame promoter Bob Arum has openly insisted that Probellum is tied to accused Irish crime lord Daniel Kinahan, who was sanctioned by the United States Department of Treasury. Probellum brass and Schaefer specifically vehemently denied the allegations, though the Dubai-based promotional company has since lost TV deals in the U.S. and U.K.
Based on those accusations they have, though, the U.S. Department of Treasury itself has no sanctions levied against Probellum as a company.
They do have sanctions levied against Daniel Kinahan himself, but a connection has not yet been established between Daniel and Probellum. Top Rank has all but ceased conducting business with that company, save for select bouts either already scheduled, like Yanni Bekalim Kanulai versus Danny Dignam last May 21st, or where the fights were negotiated without their direct involvement, like Inoue versus Donaire 2 and Inoue versus Butler. Top Rank is the U.S. promoter for Inoue. Arum and Schaefer also have a long-standing love-hate relationship. Though largely one way, Schaefer has genuinely tried to do business with all promoters for the sake of putting his fighters first, though has not had luck in advancing a Maloney versus Donaire fight. The good news is that Nonito Donaire is a warrior who is willing to face anyone, Schaefer told BoxingScene.com. Our stance was always the same. Nonito Donaire was going to challenge for the WBC bantamweight title. We went to the WBC's convention intervention to declare our position, which has not changed. I wish I could say that I was surprised, but I'm not.
And neither am I.
Bob doesn't want to do no business with Probellum. That much we know. That's why Lopez versus Prograis and Ramirez versus Prograis, that's why those fights haven't materialized.
That's reason number one, but reason number two.
Reason number two as to why Donaire versus Maloney hasn't seen the light of day, I think, is because
It's not actually a foregone conclusion that Jason Maloney would have beat Nonito. If Nonito fires off one of those left hooks and they land on Jason, can he take the shot?
being completely honest with you, I actually like Nonito's chances against Jason Maloney. Don't let those Inoue fights fool you. Not everybody can take a left hook from Nonito, even today's Nonito, who's 38 years old. Not everybody can take a left hook from Nonito the same way that Inoue did and keep fighting. Moreover, not everybody can dispatch and dispose of Nonito the same way that Inoue did.
Jason Maloney is no Naoya Inoue. What I think is going on here is that since all the alphabet titles are now vacant, Jason is choosing to go in another direction, an easier one.
In tandem with Bob Arum's unwillingness to work with Probellum.
More than one thing can be true at the same time.
Raymart Caballo, who Nonito Donaire already dispatched, and Puerto Rico's own Emmanuel Rodriguez are ranked just below Donaire. However, it is believed that both are going in separate directions. Rodriguez is in line to challenge for the vacant IBF title, earning that right following a one-sided technical decision win over Gary Antonio Russell last October in Brooklyn, New York. Rodriguez, who is promoted by Juan Orenjo,
Emmanuel Rodriguez is a former champion, former IBF champion.
he could soon become a two-time IBF Bantamweight champion if he plays his cards right. As far as Raymart Caballo, he's believed to be going the WBO route, which would lead to a vacant title fight opposite the ring, Jason Maloney.
It could.
However, such a fight can't be determined until the Philippines' own Vincent Astrolabio, ranked number 1 with the IBF and number 2 with the WBO, confirms which route he will choose for his career title fight. Maybe he fights Emmanuel Rodriguez.
For the IBF title. Maybe he goes the IBF route, and that will allow Raymart Caballo and Jason Maloney to square off for the newly vacated WBO.
As far as Nonito Donaire and the WBC title, the most likely scenario would see Donaire face Tijuana's Alejandro Santiago, who has won 3 in a row, including a 7th-round stoppage of Antonio Nieves last October in Glendale, Arizona. The 26-year-old was 8-2-1 to begin his career.
Could be fighting for an alphabet title real soon.
I guess the Bantamweight division has a new monster, quipped Schaefer, the old monster. Naoya Inoue left, but the division has a new monster, and his name is Nonito Donaire. We will see who the WBC will find to challenge us, but Nonito Donaire will become a champion once again.
And like I said, I'm not surprised. Between Bob Arum's unwillingness to work with Probellum and Jason Maloney perhaps not liking his chances against Nonito.
Tack on that there are 3 other world title paths, 3 other vacant alphabet titles that Jason Maloney can fight for. I'm not at all surprised to see that he went in another direction, because I reiterate, I actually like Nonito's chances against Jason.
The reset button has been hit at 118 pounds. The landscape is taking shape.
And it looks a lot like Nonito Donaire may once again, at this latter stage in his career, he may once again see himself crowned an alphabet champion. And finally, in men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn says Canelo is not willing to budge from September date to allow Beterbiev versus Bivol. He wants revenge.
Yeah, but you know what?
What?
Regardless of what he wants, it's not up to him.
It actually isn't. If the Beterbiev people want to move forward with a Bivol fight, there's nothing he can do about it. Canelo wants revenge, with all due respect, Hearn said on the DAZN Boxing Show. No, Hearn added in response to the question, at the end of the day, Canelo wants revenge against Dimitri Bivol. Hearn continued, like I said, we've got a lot of irons in the fire here where we have to do what's best for a number of fighters, you know? Beterbiev versus Bivol is one of the best fights in boxing. Hearn believes Bivol is the man to beat at 175 pounds, even if Beterbiev happens to have more belts. Beterbiev is coming off a spirited 8th-round stoppage of his mandatory challenger, Anthony Yarde, last Saturday in London.
It's London.
Need I remind you that, irrespective perspective of what Canelo Alvarez wants, Dimitri Bivol is not bound to give him a second fight. He's not obligated to give him a rematch.
Why do you think he was able to move into the Zurdo Ramirez fight without issue? Why do you think they're looking for an interim fight for Dimitri?
Because he doesn't have to fight Canelo Alvarez again. Make no mistake, the best 175-pounder in the room right now is Dimitri Bivol, Hearn said. Unquestionable. Of course, it's my opinion. I don't care if he's better beef, unified. I'm telling you who's the best. It's Dimitri Bivol. I rate Artur Beterbiev. He's a brilliant fighter to watch. So exciting.
He thinks Dimitri's the #1 guy.
Even though Artur's unified, in truth, I'm not keen on a Bivol versus Canelo Alvarez rematch, and I've said that more than once, especially a proposed rematch at 168 pounds.
You're gonna bring the guy down.
I'm not playing Dimitri Bivol the violin if he so chooses to drop down to 168 from 175. I'm just telling you that as a consumer, it doesn't mean as much beating Dimitri at super middleweight as it would beating him at light heavyweight.
If you want it to mean something, then that's where it's gotta be.
Like I said, Canelo's plan is to fight John Ryder and Dimitri Bivol, Hearn said. I spoke with Eddie Reynoso last night. We're looking at possible venues. Obviously, there are other fights for Canelo Alvarez. We're planning with Eddie and Saul fights for this year and next year. Obviously, you have Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, 168-pound interim WBC title fight coming up. I know Edgar Berlanga is making a lot of noise. If he can get a couple of big wins, I think that's a big fight against Canelo Alvarez as well. The priority is May against the mandatory John Ryder and moving towards Dimitri Bivol for undisputed at 168.
People aren't going to respect it. If this is about redemption, then the rematch needs to be at light heavyweight, not super middleweight.
Otherwise, why do it? Why waste your time? And don't lose sight of the fact that if the Artur Beterbiev people really want Dimitri Bivol to be their next fight, there's nothing Canelo Alvarez or Eddie Hearn can do about it.
That if the Beterbiev people want it and the Bivol people want it, they've got to make the fight.
There's nothing Canelo can do to stop them. There's nothing Canelo can do about that. It's up to the Beterbiev people to file the necessary paperwork, petition the WBC for an exemption to the mandatory so you can move straight into a Bivol fight and skip Callum Smith.
The Dimitri Bivol people can't do that for you. The Dimitri Bivol people have to file their own petition with the WBC in order to be able to compete for the belt as a non-Russian fighter.
But there's no sense in them doing that if you don't get the ball rolling, because the ball is in your court. The ball is in Artur Beterbiev's court. The ball is in Top Rank's court if they really want to make that fight next.
Not Dimitri's.
And not Matchroom's, and it really is as simple as that. Now, if Artur Beterbiev is content satisfying mandatory challengers well into his early 40s, more power to him. But don't lose sight of the fact that the ball is in his court.
If you really want undisputed, if you want that to be your next fight, then pay Callum Smith to stand down. Pay him to step aside.
Clear the way. If you do, Dimitri and his team, they'll oblige you. And Canelo will just have to find someone else to fight in September. Canelo would have to wait.
But that's if they really want it. The question is, do the Artur Beterbiev people really want that Bivol fight?